Oh my goodness.
And attendees, as you are trickling in, feel free to use the Q&A as we are proceeding here for questions, and we'll try to answer them to the best of our ability.
Mhm. And I think are we also monitoring Facebook and YouTube for
Yeah, yeah.
questions, potential
We
questions?
are we're live on Facebook if any attendees would like to convey that to friends.
Woo. Oh my goodness.
Yes, we'll just wait another
Another
minute.
minute or two. Ah, how are you doing, Catherine?
I'm delightful. How are you, Holly?
What's your day been like? I'm good. I am I am doing pretty well. Um, it as is normal, I think, for these Zoom times, I've positioned my camera so that you are getting the cleanest corner of my office. Um, and so my view for the rest of it is just a little more embarrassing, which very happy with the view that you're getting right now.
Everyone has a skeleton in the cupboard. All right, I think we're approaching a steady number, so it would be good to start.
Okay, very good.
So, hello, formally, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our pre-concert talk. We're very happy to have you. We are about to be amazed by Holly Druckman, our wonderful conductor and director. She has put together a great presentation for us to get in the mood and excited for our premiere. So, without further ado, here is Holly.
Like the thought of getting in the mood. Well, I did. Thank you, Catherine. That was our amazing Catherine, who is our lovely business manager, and without whom this project would have been completely impossible. Um, so thank you, Catherine. I wanted to, what was I going to say? So first of all, I wanted to thank you all for coming and also give you a little bit of context about the project that we're going to be doing. So let me just navigate to my notes. Yes. Uh, so thank you for coming to this release party, premiere event, online concert, whatever these events are called in these COVID times that we find ourselves in. I'm very grateful that you chose to come spend your Friday night with us. So a little more about this project. We hatched this idea because we were looking specifically for ways that um, we could restore a sense of musical partnership, of camaraderie and friendship that we had had in our rehearsals and that we had really been missing. So we designed a project that would address those feelings and that would be in part about those feelings. And so we decided to write a piece together. And we did this using the Exquisite Corpse game as a model. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that in just a second, if I can operate my computer. There we go. So you can all see that, right? Um, the Exquisite Corpse idea is probably the kind of game that you've played before and know without really knowing that you know it or know it by that name. Someone will take a piece of paper and fold it up several times, and the first person will draw something on the top and then fold it over. And then the next person can see where they left off, but not what's actually been drawn. And you get this sort of weird hybrid random creature. Oh, sorry, weird random hybrid creature or monster. And that's how we wrote this piece. It's not quite as absurd as this, but that's how we wrote this piece. Six of us decided to write movements of music and we handed them off to each other. And just to show you an example, for instance, this is one of the pieces on the left, Leo Balkovitz Happening. And the way that it ends overlaps with the way that Tyler Boak's piece Raumgewinn starts. You can see he Tyler copied out the end of Leo's piece and overlaid it on top of his score. And another example is later on in the program, you'll hear a piece by me, in the piece, you'll hear a piece by me called Eurydice, which ends with this hiss, which then gets picked up by the next composer, by Jenny Herzog. Start her piece. So the topic of this piece is about the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. Now, I consider myself something of a nerd, an expert nerd on the subject, but I understand that you all probably don't want to hear my entire undergraduate thesis paper, no matter how good I think it is. So I think what'll be best is if I give you a couple of basic details about what the myth is, how I interpret it, and then I will give a couple of examples of other Orpheus-related pieces just to illustrate some of the points that I'm trying to make. And to end, I will say a little more about the piece that you're about to hear, and I will give you instructions on what to do next, how to access the video and the Q&A session. So I should begin by saying that I'm not the only one who's a little obsessed with this myth. There are so many artists and creative intellectuals throughout history who have used it to express their views about music and love. And they all tend to tell the story in such a way that it turns the myth into a sort of mirror. It reflects back their own cultural beliefs and reveals something about the perspective of the storyteller. Really, it tells everybody a little bit about who they are. So I'm going to summarize the myth very quickly. I'm going to try to do it very simply. Hopefully I got it right. So here we go. Orpheus is the best musician in the world. And his music is so good that it's kind of magical. In some versions of the story, he's supposed to be a god or a demigod. Orpheus is married to Eurydice, and one day she dies from a snake bite, very sadly, and Orpheus decides to go to the underworld to try and bring her back. And he succeeds in convincing Hades, the god of the dead, to release Eurydice because of the way that he plays his music. Oh, whoops, sorry. So there he is in the underworld playing his music for Hades. But there's a catch. Orpheus has to lead Eurydice back to the world of the living without looking at her, or the deal is off. Now, at some point, of course, he turns around to look at her, and none of the versions of the story give the same reason why, of course. But Eurydice dies again, and Orpheus has no choice but to go back to the world of the living. And the ending of the myth is really the most divergent aspect of it from one version to another. Some people say that Orpheus was so sad that he killed himself, and some say that Orpheus became a god and actually ascended into heaven. And some say that he renounced all women and was then murdered by the Bacchante, who were a cult of women who worshipped Dionysus, who were feeling very scorned by Orpheus. And so they murdered him by tearing him apart limb from limb, and they decided to send his head floating along down the river where it continued to sing. Don't you hate it when that happens? I hate it when that happens. So for my own analysis of the myth and for how other creatives use it, there's a framework that I find really helpful, which is to think about the myth in three aspects: the song, the gaze, and the death of Orpheus. And I will show you this triangle that I made of the three different aspects. So what do I mean when I say these things? The aspect of the song refers to Orpheus's role as a performer and a composer. What constitutes good music? Should good music be persuasive? Should good music be beautiful? Should it be soothing? How does music work on us, its listeners? Composers use this aspect to express their own ideas about what music is, or at least what it should be, what they think it should be. The gaze refers to Orpheus's backwards glance at Eurydice, which causes him to lose her again. It's a meditation on human connection and on human loss. What does the gaze signify? What does the backward turn signify? It's different from one composer to another. And composers use it to express ideas about love and loss and about sort of music's intersection with both of those themes. The death of Orpheus refers to the myriad endings of the story and what they might represent to any one composer. Composers usually use it to express their ideas about time and to pass judgment on some of Orpheus's earlier actions in the story. So that is just very generally how I like to think about breaking up the myth. And now I'm going to stop my screen share, and hopefully you can all still see me, I hope. But I will keep going with this. And before we go on, I would like to give you a quick example about other composers using the Orpheus myth as a mirror through the aspects of the Song of Orpheus and the gaze of Orpheus. Really quick example. Two foundational works of music about Orpheus that really defined the genre of opera. There's Claudio Monteverdi's opera Orfeo from 1607, which really defined opera as a genre. It's considered the first modern opera. And there is Christoph Willibald Gluck's 1762 opera about Orpheus and Eurydice, which is referred to as reform opera. It's kind of reformed opera in Paris when it was created. So comparing and contrasting those two from the point of view of Orpheus's song and Orpheus's gaze. In Monteverdi's Orpheus, Orpheus has to use his music to persuade the gatekeeper of the underworld to grant him passage. And he succeeds in convincing Hades to give him Eurydice back. But he turns to look at her before it's time. The implication is out of hubris. You know, his music has just convinced the king of the underworld, so surely he has unlimited power over death, except he definitely doesn't. As Hades says in that version, he breaks the law as he and loses Eurydice again. So what does all that mean? For me, I think that Monteverdi means to say that music at its most powerful can be a tool of persuasion, and a tool of persuasion that works on our emotions, even subconsciously. And it can be used for good and bad purposes. But there are limits to its power. And there are certain laws that can't be broken. No matter how highly you esteem yourself, you can't be so prideful as to not humble yourself before God and before the supernatural. So that's one example. The other example, Gluck's Orpheus opera. For Gluck, Orpheus doesn't use his music to persuade, but instead, very deliberate distinction. He has to calm the Furies so that he can enter the underworld without harm. It's a very different idea than persuading the gatekeeper. This idea of having to use his music to have cooler, to have more rational tempers prevail. Later, when Orpheus is leading Eurydice out from the underworld, she becomes upset, and the reason why he turns is to comfort her, and he loses her in that moment. So at that point, Orpheus sings a lament, Che farò senza Euridice. It's one of the most famous Orpheus pieces ever, and the lament is so beautiful and so virtuous that he actually gets Eurydice back. This time he gets her back forever. So what does that mean? To me, I think Gluck is saying that the purpose of Orpheus's music is to soothe. And the challenge for this Orpheus is actually to distance himself a little from his emotions, to be stoic. The power of this kind of music doesn't lie in its magic powers of persuasion, but in its restraint and its subtlety. It's really closely connected to Enlightenment philosophy. Music is a language. It's a code that has to be cracked. And if you can crack the code, you can do anything. You can bring Eurydice back from the dead, even though you're only human. So that's the kind of connection and mirroring that I mean about telling the story of Orpheus, how Monteverdi's point of view really reflects his views and the time in which he lived, and Gluck's opera really reflects his. And that's the sort of comparison that I find really meaningful and really potent about this myth. And I want to give one other example of this, about the death of Orpheus, that speaks specifically to Carduce's project. There is a modern opera called Bert Whistle's Harrison Birtwistle's The Mask of Orpheus, which treats the death of Orpheus in a very complex way. I'm sure there are people listening to this who have heard it. I know there are people who are listening to this who have heard it. And who will be horrified that I'm simplifying it so much. But the main thing to know is that to represent Orpheus's death, in part, it shows a puppet of Orpheus actually being torn apart to mimic the way that the Bacchante murder him. And they actually do this several times, tearing him apart, putting him back together, and doing it all over again. And this idea to me is really compelling, the idea of something breaking up, the fragmentation. And it's actually foundational in other ways throughout the opera. There are multiple actors and singers who play each character, and the story itself is not told linearly in time. There are events that are presented out of order. There are events that are presented simultaneously. But it does cause you to reflect. And when I think about it, at least, it made me realize that that is how we all tell stories anyway. We tell stories one memory at a time, sometimes out of order, sometimes correcting it later, sometimes interpreting it differently. And Birtwistle even goes so far as to suggest that the myth and time itself don't exist linearly. All of it happens at once, and it goes on happening. So this idea of stitching something back together, that's at the heart of our project. We in Carduce have felt so distant from each other over the past year. And we wanted to put the corpse of Orpheus back together, if you will, and I hope you will. In connecting those parts of music to each other, we really reconnected emotionally to each other as well. And our hope is that in sharing it with you, we all feel more connected to each other as well. So some parts of the music that you'll hear deal with themes that I've mentioned, but not all of them. The piece is a mirror of who we are and the themes that matter to us. To wrap this up, I would like to thank the members of Carduce very sincerely. And I would like to thank our audio wizard friend, Peter Atkinson, who I hope is watching right now, and our friends and collaborators, the visual artists Maya and Ravel, for their beautiful work creating the video. It is so compelling and adds a completely new dimension to the music. I think Catherine will now post the link and to meet us back for the Q&A. Please copy it because Zoom is weird like that. Copy it and paste it somewhere. There's a link to the video itself and a link to the Q&A. I know that we also sent you a bunch of links and emails and on Facebook, and you can access it in all sorts of different ways. Please note that we only just published the video about 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago. So if you've already pulled it up, you might need to refresh your browser or to refresh the window in order to actually access it. In addition, we're also planning on having a less formal reception after the Q&A, just to kind of hang out and chat. And we will give you the Zoom link to that sometime during the Q&A. And just a few final words. I would like to say that this piece is best experienced on a big screen in the dark. I would like to ask you to try to limit other noise and all potential interruptions. I'm unable to do that because I live across the street from a police station at a very busy intersection. I am honestly thrilled that I haven't been interrupted by sirens or loud music. So try to limit potential interruptions. If you are able, use something other than your computer's built-in speakers to listen, something with a more prominent detailed sound and fuller bass. I would also like to say that, just real quickly, this event is free, but we would be very grateful, especially in these difficult times, if you considered making a contribution to support our work. There is a donate button on our project page for the Orpheus Fragments, and we are a 501c3, so contributions are fully tax deductible. And if you like the work, please consider joining our mailing list. You can see there's a way to do it through the subscription tab on our website. So many thanks. See you at around 8:45. Catherine, does that work?
That's right. Yep, 8:45. I've just thrown
Yes.
the watch button and the Q&A 8:45 session in the chat, and let me know if you have any questions. We look forward to seeing you back here.
Okay. Oh, one quick note. I don't know if everybody can see this, but a quick note from Maya and Ruvel, our video collaborators. If you are viewing the project on Vimeo, please be sure to set the resolution to 1080 high definition. You can do that by going to the bottom right settings wheel. It will greatly enhance your experience. So yeah, on behalf of Cardus and Maya and Ruvel and everyone else whose talents helped create this, thank you. And we hope you like it. See you at 8:45.
Bye, everyone.